Hi everyone, I welcome you all on this session of Azure Firewall in our Azure networking series. In this video, we're going to talk about what Azure Firewall is, and then we'll quickly discuss the different features of standard offering of Azure Firewall. We have two different offerings, standard and premium. In this one, we're going to talk about the standard one, and then we'll discuss Azure Firewall policy, rules, and the rule collections, and we'll talk about the precedence order of those rules, how the rules gets apply, which rule gets preference over the other, and then we'll also discuss about the small test architecture which we have used for this step-by-step demo. So let's begin, guys. So basically, a firewall, the concept remains same. The only thing is that this Azure Firewall is a managed service on a cloud-based managed service on Azure cloud, which will help you to protect your resource in Azure virtual networks. It's a stateful firewall. When I say stateful firewall, it basically looks into all the complete context of your network, not only the individual packets. With Azure Firewall, you will get built-in high availability as well as unrestricted cloud scalability. The traffic by default, all the traffic by default is denied. And when we talk about the recommended architecture, it is recommended to place your firewall in a central or a hub VNET, in a hub and spoke kind of an architecture, which is a recommended network architecture from Microsoft. When you deploy a firewall, you will have a firewall policy which will contain different rules for your NAT, your network, as well as the application-based traffic filtering, by which you would be allowing or denying inbound or outbound access. Now let's talk about the firewall rules. As I said, we have got three different categories. So one is application rule, which is applicable to the outbound traffic, and where you will define your fully qualified domain names, which your VMs can access from the subnet, which are protected by the firewall. Then we'll have network rules. Network rules are applicable to inbound as well as outbound traffic, and there you will define the source IP address, the protocol, your source or your destination port, and the destination address as well. Then we have NAT rules or DNAT rules, which are applicable to inbound traffic. Here you will define the destination IP address and ports to translate your inbound request as if you were trying to do an RDP on to a VM which is protected, which is capped in a subnet or capped in a virtual network which is protected by Azure Firewall. You will use NAT rules to reach to that VM from the internet. Now the precedence for the inbound traffic or the inbound incoming traffic, NAT rules and the network rules are applicable, and out of these two, NAT rules will have the higher priority than the network rules. In outbound traffic, you will have application as well as the network rules applicable, and out of these two, network rules will have higher precedence over application rules. And one thing is to remember that these rules are terminating, so when there is a match found, there is no further processing happens, right? So if there's a rule found which is denying certain things in the network rules, and it might be allowing at the application in the application rule, so once there's a match found in the network rule collection, the further processing will not happen. Now just to have this step-by-step demo, we have configured a small test network. In that test network, to keep the video with small, I have already kept ready one virtual network and two subnets in this virtual network. There is a one subnet which is named as Azure Firewall subnet, and you need to remember this thing, that the subnet name should remain exactly same. If you change the name, this will not be accepted, and this will not allow you to place your firewall into it. It is always recommended by Microsoft to have a subnet mask of 26 for these for firewall subnet. Then we have another subnet, which is a server subnet, where we have capped our firewall demo virtual machine, and we have given this IP range to the subnet. Now we will deploy and configure the firewall rule and the policies. After that, we'll create an application rule to allow this VM to have internet access to access google.com. Then we'll also configure a network rule to allow this VM to have access to external DNS servers. And then we'll also configure an and DNAT rule or the NAT rule to allow RDP from these users to reach to this VM. And please make a note, this VM do not have a public IP configured, and there is as of now there is no port opened on it, right? And in the last, we will configure or we'll check the functionality of our firewall. So let's jump into the Azure portal, guys. So guys, we are into our Azure management portal. If you go and here, let's quickly have a look at the topology which we have configured for you. And so if you see, we have this VNET. We have got two subnets, server subnet and the Azure Firewall subnet, where we have our firewall demo virtual machines. Now we'll configure an Azure Firewall into this firewall subnet. Let's go and start doing it. You can find it from here, you can search it from here, because I have just used it, so it starts showing into my favorites. So I'm going to click create firewall. Here's my subscription. I'm going to pick the existing source scope. You can create new as well. Let's create give it a name. I'm going to call it demo firewall. Here the region where you need to pick the region. I'm stick with the default one. Your Azure Firewall is a resource which can be placed across availability zones. You can pick your availability zones from here if you want to have this deployment as a kind of a high availability deployment. One thing you need to remember here: if you do not pick an availability zone now, you cannot change it later, right? This is something you need to remember. Then we have got two different offerings, standard and premium, as we discussed. This is for a standard offering, so I'm gonna staying with the standard. And then because the management of this firewall we're gonna do with the help of a firewall policy rather than the classic rules, which were the legacy ones. So I'm gonna stick with the firewall policy, and because currently there is no, I'm gonna add a new policy. I'll give it a name. I'll call it demo firewall policy 01. Okay. Then click on yes, and now it gives you an option to choose a virtual network. You know that there are two different ways to create Azure Firewall. One, when you create your VNET, that's also a possibility, and there's a one place from which you can create here. I mean, you can create your VNET along with the firewall. Then, because we already have a network created, so click on use existing and pick your subnet. So it will only let you pick the subnet which aligns to that rule of the naming convention. So I'm going to pick that one. So this is my VNet where my subnet is residing, and here it is asking you to have a public IP address. So I don't have the existing one. I'm going to create a new one. I'm going to call it firewall PIP 01. And you saw this SKU is standard and assignment is static. So because static assignment belongs to standard SKU, so these things are already grayed out for us. So we're going to click on OK. So now we have got a public IP. Now it gives you an option for the forced tunneling. So the forced tunneling basically when you configure your new Azure firewall, there are two options you can get. You can route your all internet bound traffic to a next hop, which might be a kind of a virtual appliance on your on-premises, where you can audit, inspect all the traffic which is going from your virtual network to internet. So you can do that forced tunneling and you can enable it. Once you do that, there will be a firewall management subnet gets created, and that subnet will have a direct access to the internet. Another thing to be which we should note, that this forced tunneling can only be configured when you are creating a new firewall. You cannot do this after creating a firewall. So this is something which you need to plan beforehand before you start configuring your firewall. Then we'll have, it's asking to have tags, which is a very good thing to happen, but we are not going to create that one because I'm going to skip it. Click on review plus create. It's going to take some time. It's going to do a final validation, and then it will ask us to create. So now my deployment has been submitted, and this is gonna be ready soon. In the meantime, I'll show you how we can configure firewall when we configure the VNet. Also, I have shown this part in my another video where we have created VNets and subnets. Those who does not know how to create a VNet, how to carve out a subnet out of that VNet, they can see the previous videos. I'm gonna put the links in the description below. So let's quickly I'm going to demonstrate how you can configure or create a VM and while creating, oh sorry, create a VNet, and while creating a VNet, how you can create, where you can opt for the firewall creation. Sorry, so let's go for VNet. So here it is. Click on virtual networks. I have one. I'm just gonna do this. I'm not gonna complete this creation. I'm just gonna show you where it is. So I'm gonna give it a resource group. I will give it a name, AZ demo VNet, and that's it. Click on IP address. I'm going to stick with the default one. Click on security, and here you see, if you click on enable here, give it a name, the subnet address space and the public IP address, and you will get a firewall created along with the creation of a virtual network. So this is something which you can keep in mind. We're not going to do that, so I'm going to go back. Still deployment is in progress, so I'm going to pause this video for a moment and come back again. So you can see the deployment is complete. So let's go to our resource, and this is where our virtual firewall is, and this is the public IP configuration which we have. We need to use this IP later on, so we'll come back to this one now, because if we go back to our architecture, we have got two subnets, and let's go back here, and that's my topology. If we'll quickly go through the resource group, here's my virtual network. See, so we have this firewall demo virtual machine in this subnet, while my firewall is in this subnet. So what we need to do, we need to make sure that whatever traffic goes, it should go from this subnet and should use this firewalls as a next hop for this, for all the traffic which it has. So it would require a route to be set from this subnet to Azure Firewall subnet. So let's do that now. Go back, click route table first. So this is the route table. Let's quickly do that. Create a route table. Select the resource group, give it a name. I'll say firewall RT01. I want to allow this propagate gateway routes, and if you need to know more about how to create route tables, what are the routes, what are the configuration, please go through the other video which we have. I'm going to put the description in the link in the description below. So click on tags. I'm not going to put a tag, just click review and create, and it's going to run the final validation, and then we can create it. So I'm going to click on create. We need to wait for a couple of seconds, and then it will be ready. Our route table is ready, so let's go to resource. Any route table is of no use till the time you attach it to a subnet. So I'm gonna associate it with the subnet, and which subnet we're gonna use, because this is gonna take traffic from the server subnet to Azure Firewall subnet. So I'm gonna associate it with the server subnet. So I'm gonna pick my virtual network, and I'm gonna pick my subnet, and I'm gonna click OK. So this will get associated with my server subnet. Now we need to add, because this is just a table, there's no route in it. So we'll click on routes and click on add, give it a name. I'm going to call it server to firewall route 01. Address prefix, I want that every traffic which wants to go to internet, it should go and reach to the firewall first. So I'm going to put the address prefix as this one. What should be the next hop type? So basically we are going to use, our next hop would be firewall, which is kind of a virtual appliance. I'm going to select that. Now on the next hop address, it would require private IP address of my firewall. So let's see what's the private address of my firewall. You can just open it here. So this is my firewall private IP 10.2.30.4. I'm gonna pick this one, I'm gonna paste it here, and that's it. So that's how you gonna create a route. Now this route is being added, but again by default your firewall will deny all the traffic. So we need to set up certain rules before we start testing the firewall configuration. So let's go back to the firewall, go to the demo firewall, and then click on your firewall policies. So here you will find all the policies which we can configure: patent policy, rule collections, DNAT rules, network rules. First, let's go and create a application rule. So basically, if you see, you can add a rule collection and then you add a rule into it. So currently we don't have anything. So we're gonna create a rule collection first. I'm gonna give it a name. I'm gonna call it allow internet. This is a type which is application type, so I'm gonna stick with that one. Here you need to give the priority value. It should be between 100 to 65,000. I'm gonna keep it 200. Then what kind of a action would this rule collection will have? It's allow or deny. So I'm gonna go for allow, and the collection group name would be the default application rule collection group. So this is I'm gonna keep it as the default because this is going to be a application rule collection. Now I need to give a name to my very first rule. I'm gonna call it allow Google. Source type would be your IP address, and in the IP address, what we'll do, we'll put the source of our subnet. So what is our subnet in which my server is residing? So let's quickly go and look at that as well. So if I go into the demo VNet, into my subnets, so we have this server subnet that is 10.2.2./024. So I'm going to pick the same IP range and put it here, 10.2.2.0/24. So this is my source IP address. Now what is the protocol? So basically I'm going to use HTTPS. So I'm going to type, let's say HTTPS, and you can select TLS inspection. If you select that one, then all your unencrypted and encrypted traffic will be inspected. So I'm going to skipping it as of now. What should be the destination type? Because I'm going to only allow www.google.com to be accessible from this machine, so I'm going to stick with the FQDN. Otherwise we have FQDN tag, we have URLs, and we have web categories. You can pick based upon your requirements. So I'm going to pick with FQDN, and I'm going to put the website name here, in this case, which is www.google.com. So that's my application rule. I'm going to click on add. Once again go through all the fields, if it's okay, then fine, click on add. So we have created an application rule. Now let's create a network rule, but first of all we need to wait till the time this rule collection gets updated for the application rule. So we need to wait till the time. Now our application rule collection has been successfully updated. Let's go and click create the network rule. So currently here also we don't have anything, so click on add a rule collection. I'm going to give it a name. I'll say allow network. I'm going to keep it collection type for the network because this is what it is. I'm going to give it a priority of 200. You can have the same priority to different rule collection groups. Again, the action type you can define allow or deny. We're going to keep it at allow, keeping it at allow. Then the collection group, we're going to group them as a network rule collection group. Give it a name for your first network rule. I'm going to call it allow DNS. Click on the source type. You need to define what would be the source type you will have. So here you can see the IP address, because I'm going to again keep the same subnet. So we'll put that subnet here, 10.2.2.0/24. Now you need to select the protocol, because we are selecting for the DNS. It's a UDP base. I'm going to select UDP. The destination port is a DNS, so I'm going to go for a port number 53. What would be the destination type? Again, I'm going to select the IP address, because my DNS, I'm going to give the IP address of my DNS server. So we have got a IP address of this DNS server, 209.244.0.3. You can give a couple of them by separating them with the help of a comma, and click on add. So once you think all the input is correct, so click on add, and you need to wait again for some time before the network rule collection gets updated. Okay guys, so this network rule collection is ready. So it has been updated now. So now let's go and configure our DNAT rules, basically the rule settings which we're going to use for doing RDP to this machine. So I'm gonna, the machine which is in the server subnet, I'm gonna give it a name called allow RDP. This is a DNAT connect kind of a collection type, so I'm gonna keep it same. And here again, let me give a numeric value of 200, and you know the collection action is a DNAT group, would be the default DNAT rule collection group. Let's create our first rule. I'm gonna call it RDP rule 01. It's going to be based on IP address again, so I'm gonna put an IP address here. And let's say, because this time is the traffic is inbound and it's going to come from outside, so I'm going to keep it all. Also, you can put a specific IP, or you can also put an IP range over there. Then select your protocol. I'm going to keep it TCP because I'm going to use RDP. The destination port would be 3389 because this is a Windows virtual machine. Destination type would be the IP address again, right? And the destination this time, I'll just scroll a little bit here, and the destination this time would be the IP address or the public IP address of my firewall. So I'm gonna grab that IP from there, click on home, the firewall, and click here, demo firewall, and this is the IP I have. So I'm gonna copy this IP from here. I'll keep it back and just paste it here, sorry, the destination here. Now into the translated address, or the address which is going to be translated after this, after your RDP traffic hits the public IP of Azure Firewall, you need to give that traffic here. So you need to give the private IP of your VM and specific IP of your VM. So that VM IP was 10.2.2.4, and we can confirm that quickly so that we should not make a mistake here. So if you look at it here, 10.2.2.4, so that's what I have kept here, 10.2.2.4, and the translated port would be, because it's an RDP, I'm gonna make it 3389. So that's how you can add. So click on tab. We missed, or we have done some mistakes, so it's not allowing us to add the rule here. So let's see what has happened. So this is correct. This is correct. This is correct. So this might be a space here. Let's click backspace or a delete, and yes, there was an additional space was there, which you need to remove, and click on add. So now we have created 3 different rule collections with one rule each in application, network, and the DNAT rules, and it's being updated now. In the meantime, this rule collection gets updated. There are a couple of things which we can discuss. First of all, the parent policy. This firewall policy can be the child policy of a parent policy. If that happens, the preference or the precedence to be given all the rules which are part of the parent policy, and all the rules will get inherited from the parent one. Currently we don't have any parent policy, so there's nothing, but you need to remember that. And the parent policy should be in the same region where we are creating this child policy. And your firewall policy, you can associate it with the firewalls across the regions wherever your firewalls are stored, right? Then we have a threat intelligence. So threat intelligence, again, basically it's a intelligence based of filtering which you can enable or disable, and you have options to alert only, disabled, or alert and deny. So basically when you enable it, traffic based upon your setting can be, you can alert, you can block traffic from the known malicious IP addresses, and from where those IP addresses would be taken, that is from the Microsoft Threat Intelligence feed, and right, and these 3 options we have here. So currently we are not doing that, and when we start configuring our firewall premium, we'll have the option of TLS inspection and the IDPS, which is not currently the part of the standard offering. Then we have the secured virtual network. So basically this is the network which is secured currently, and I think that's it. So let's go and see whether it's working or not properly. So we have configured all the rules. I'm gonna take the firewall public IP, and first of all we'll see if it is allowed to do the RDP or not. So I'm gonna take this one. I'm going to RDP and just click in here. It's not copied, it seems. That's fine. So I'm going to type it here, 10.1 85.56.1. I'm gonna connect. This is the firewall public. So here is the VM which we have, and you can see this is the Azure Firewall IP address, public IP address, but which is gonna log into a VM which has got only private IP. So once we reach to the VM, then we'll try to access whether we can access those site which we configured. So let's see. So let's see whether this our application rule is working or not. So where we have defined that google.com can be accessed on HTTPS. So I'm going to do this www.google.com, and if you see, it says the HTTP request from so and so address deny, and there is no rule matched. So there's, because we configured only for HTTPS, not for HTTP. So I'm going to change this a little bit and click on just HTTPS, enter, and see we are able to see go through the firewall.